For today's video, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I thought it would be kind of fun to take a look at the games that I've been dabbling around with in between my reviews. There's no real rhyme or reason behind the choice of games that I'm playing for this video. This is just some of the random shit that I've been playing in my downtime. If you enjoy this sort of content, be sure to give the video a thumbs up and let me know about it in the comments down below. And let's get into this with a game that I wish I knew about way back in elementary school. Gundam Wing and this Duel released for the Super Famicom in 1996, and it's a fighting game based off of the Gundam Wing anime. It never made its way out here to the US, and that makes me kinda sad, because I can vividly remember speculating and fantasizing with my friends on the playground about what a fighting game based on Gundam Wing could look like. But there was never one that we knew of that existed. And there is a fan-translated ROM of this that has been floating around the internet for quite a while now. I actually have a reproduction cartridge of that translation right here, but for the gameplay footage that you're about to see in this video, honestly I used emulation just because it was so much easier for me to record that way. Gundam Wing and this Duel is a pretty run-of-the-mill tournament fighter. You are able to play as each of the 5 main Gundam pilots from the anime, and they're all in their respective Gundams. Then you have other characters like Zex, Noin, and Lady Un, piloting other familiar mobile suits from the anime. Altogether, there are 9 characters for you to choose from, and for this review, I decided to play as Death Scythe just because that was always my favorite when I was a kid. I looked up a move list, and it looks like every character has 2 special moves that are all performed the same way for every character. And then each character also has a super special move that I was just never really able to get down just right. The game has a few different play modes to choose from. First off, you have the story mode, which doesn't really seem to have any kind of story at all, unless that info was given in the manual. All you do in the story mode is fight through each character of the game one after another. Then there's a final boss fight against the Epyon suit, but I never got that far into it. I'm really not that much into tournament fighters, and despite playing on easy mode, I just kept getting my ass kicked. But, you know, maybe I just suck at this type of game. Then you have your usual 2-player versus mode, and a trial mode. Trial mode is just a series of 1-round fights with no time limit, and all you have to do is take down as many opponents as you can until you die. So it's a lot like story mode, only with no final boss. The graphics are incredible for 1996. This looks exactly like the anime, and the intro is recreated incredibly well. I love the way that the main theme sounds on the SNES sound chip. I'm really happy that I finally learned about this game. To be honest, there really isn't a whole lot of content here for somebody who's playing it mostly by themselves like I am. But if you've got a few friends over, this game is a really fun time. The next game that I want to look at released for the Nintendo 64 way back in December of 1999, just before the start of the 21st century. And it actually took me kind of by surprise. It's a decently competent first-person shooter during a time period when that genre was still almost entirely on PC. Although the controls on this are something that I don't think I could ever get used to. Armories Project Swarm has a really weird control scheme. At least the default one is weird. You move your character around with the C buttons and look around with the analog stick. Now, just hearing that might be kind of hard to wrap your head around, but consider how most games control these days. Movement is always done with the left thumb, and looking around is always done with the right thumb. With this control scheme, that's basically just reversed. So if you don't have the context of modern controls, this game would be a lot easier to play. Luckily, there are a few control options, including one that pretty much mimics GoldenEye, and I used this setup when I played because I was already sort of familiar with those controls. The only problem with this is that the Y-axis is still inverted, and as far as I can see, there is no way to change it. So pressing down makes you look up, and pressing up makes you look down. In a flying game like Rogue Squadron or Star Fox, this sort of thing makes sense. But in a first-person shooter, I just get confused by it and I can never wrap my head around it. The story seems to be your basic alien invasion plot, but to be honest, I'm not really sure because I'm sort of a slow reader, and this text is scrolling by just a little bit too fast for me. There are 2 characters for you to choose from. The first is Tony Lewis, the gung-ho shoot everything in sight guy. Then there's Myra Lane, the more tactical and stealthy of the two. I went with Tony for this review just because I like shooting shit up. The graphics have aged about as well as most other games released around this time. Everything looks sort of muddy and the draw distance is terrible. Some of these rooms are so dark that I literally can't see anything at all. I tried cranking up the brightness on my TV as high as it could go, and that really didn't help that much. And eventually I found that shooting my laser would kind of light up the area around me a little bit, so I just started shooting that around just so I could see what the hell is going on. Not only that, but to progress through the game, you'll occasionally have to press switches to open doors or deactivate electrical fences. And with how shitty everything looks, these switches just blend right into the wall. And there was one time where I activated one without even knowing it because I couldn't see it. Despite being heavily flawed and having one hell of a learning curve, this game is still pretty fun. I might even go so far as to say as it's a hidden gem from that time period. There is also a PS1 version of the game, and from what I've seen, that one looks a little bit better. So if you want to play the game today, that's probably the better way to go about it. The next game that I want to look at is the one that I played the most for this video. I usually don't play a whole lot of racing games, but Wipeout Pure for the PSP is the most fun that I have had with that genre in a very, very long time. I think the best way to describe this game is Mario Kart meets F-Zero. You've got the power-up and combat of a Mario Kart game, along with the speed of an F-Zero game. Most of the power-ups that you'll find are pretty typical for kart racers. You've got your missiles, heat-seeking missiles, mines, as well as some interesting new ones, like an autopilot, which I actually really liked because I'm usually really terrible at this sort of game. If your shields run out, your vehicle explodes and you're out of the race. Luckily, if you're low on shields, or if you just have a power-up that you don't want, you can press the circle button, which will absorb that power-up into your shields and give you a health boost. This is a very arcadey feeling racer in that it's really easy to just pick it up and start playing. However, the speed gives it enough of a challenge that it stays engaging for a very long period of time. And the challenge really ramps up as you unlock the higher and higher speed classes. You start with the Vector Speed class, which is the slowest, and then as you win tournaments, you unlock the faster ones. Each speed class has two tournaments, an Alpha and Beta tournament. Then there's an Ascension tournament, which is basically the other two tournaments played back to back. There is a decent amount of content here for a portable racing game. There's 8 tracks to choose from and 8 vehicles, several different speed classes, time trials, and a zone mode where you just have to survive for as long as you can while your vehicle keeps getting progressively faster and faster. Like I said, I usually don't play a whole lot of racing games, but this is one that I had enough fun with that I wanted to keep practicing it, and I eventually got good enough that I get first or second place in most of the races that I do. And this is definitely the most amount of fun that I've had playing a racing game since I first played Mario Kart 64 way back in the day. The last game that I want to look at is a Game Boy Advance game that is really impressive for its time. Like, if you saw this back when it first came out in 2002, 2003-ish, this shit would have fucking blown your mind. With full 3D models and environments, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 for the Game Boy Advance is genuinely impressive for the hardware that it's on. And actually, I would say that it's probably one of the most impressive looking games ever released on the GBA. Music has always been a huge part of the Tony Hawk games. The music choices in these games have influenced the musical taste of an entire generation of gamers. Actually, not just gamers. Even people who don't usually play many video games have discovered some of their favorite songs from this series. And the music for the GBA version of this one, they definitely tried. Obviously, it isn't the same music as what's on the console versions of the game, but many of these tracks actually sound like they could almost be a song that you would have heard on the radio in the early 2000s. Take a listen to some. controls are awkward but functional. You jump with the B button, use the shoulder buttons for your grab tricks and your flip tricks, and then grind with A. These are a lot easier when you're playing it with an actual GBA versus using a PS4 controller with my Raspberry Pi. When I was using the PlayStation controller, it was just instinct to start playing it like it was a console game. And that didn't work because the controls are totally different. The isometric angle makes it really hard to be precise, and it's difficult to tell exactly what angle you're hitting the ramp or half pipe at. This will usually result in your skater just uncontrollably flying all around the level. And exploring these levels in general is a lot harder than I feel like it should be. Overall, I found this to be one of the most frustrating experiences that I've ever had with a Tony Hawk game. And that's saying a lot because those games can get pretty hard. Or at least I have a hard time with them. It took over an hour of playing just for me to unlock the second level. Then I played that level once, and it was enough for me to say, this game, and I turned it off. Despite being very frustrating, I still had a lot of fun playing this game. And if ever I'm going somewhere like the DMV where I know I'm gonna have to wait for a little while, this is the kind of game that I can put in my pocket to play while I wait. So this video is a little bit different for me, but it was a lot of fun to put together. If you enjoy this sort of thing, once again, let me know by giving this video a thumbs up and tell me about it in the comments down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here, I upload on Saturdays. Follow me on Twitter, and I hope to see you next time.